That was a very funny script, and that we finally got Les Mayfield attached.
I like the contrast between the comedy and the real hard action.
It's a strong script. It was like the situation was rich, but, we make it our own.
Bluestreak turned 25 years old, and somehow, most fans still do not know half of what went on behind the scenes. The film looks simple on the surface. A jewel thief hides a diamond in an air duct, gets arrested, comes back to find cops everywhere, and has to pretend he belongs there. Martin Lawrence in his prime, making people laugh, causing chaos. Easy to dismiss as a quick, crowd-pleasing comedy from 1999. But that is exactly what makes what happened behind the camera so extraordinary. Because Bluestreak was never supposed to work the way it did. Before this video is over, you are going to find out why Dave Chappelle nearly walked off set entirely. You are going to learn which iconic film Bluestreak quietly outgrossed at the box office. You are going to discover which Oscar winner was hiding in plain sight in a blink-and-you-miss-it role. And then, there is the bonus fact at the end, something that had nothing to do with filmmaking and everything to do with Martin Lawrence almost not surviving 1999 at all. So ask yourself this: how well do you actually know Bluestreak? Stay locked in, because we are going 20 facts deep, and things are about to get a lot more interesting than you expected. Fact 1. The real origin story nobody talks about. Let us start at the very beginning, because Bluestreak did not come from the mind of a Hollywood writer sitting in a Los Angeles office dreaming up something original. The core concept, the entire premise that made the movie work, was lifted almost directly from a 1965 British comedy called The Big Job. Think about that for a second. A Martin Lawrence comedy released in 1999 was built on the bones of a film that came out 34 years earlier, during a time when color television was still a novelty for most households. In The Big Job, a gang of thieves pulls off a heist and stashes stolen cash inside a hollowed-out tree. They get caught before they can retrieve it. When they finally get released from prison years later and return to collect the money...
Place you ain't found in it?
Yeah, it is. Here, you know what would be a nice thing to do? When we get that money, we'll bank it there.
They make a devastating discovery. The tree is still standing, but now it sits in the middle of a police station courtyard. Bluestreak took that exact premise and updated it. Diamond instead of cash, air duct instead of tree, LAPD headquarters instead of a British police courtyard, Martin Lawrence instead of a cast of British character actors. But the skeleton was identical. A thief hides something valuable, gets locked up, comes back to find his hiding spot is now crawling with the very people who want to put him away again. Hollywood has always recycled good ideas. The question is whether the new version brings enough energy to make people forget the original. Bluestreak did exactly that. Most audiences had never heard of The Big Job and still have not. Martin Lawrence made the concept feel brand new. But now you know the truth, and you cannot unknow it. Fact 2. Dave Chappelle refused to wear a dress and did not budge an inch. Dave Chappelle plays Tully in Bluestreak.
I don't know what you're doing, but it ain't gonna work. Hey, let me get my gun back. Ow.
The getaway driver who somehow manages to be both completely loyal and spectacularly incompetent. He is the guy who sits outside a building chain smoking cigarettes until a pile of butts on the ground catches the attention of passing police officers. Every scene he is in lands. The character works because Chappelle understood exactly how to play someone who means well but cannot stay out of his own way. What most fans do not know is that the script originally contained a scene where Tully goes undercover in disguise, and that disguise involved him wearing a dress. The writers created the sequence. The director was on board. The producers saw it as comedy gold. Chappelle saw it as something he wanted no part of. He told the production team no, not hesitantly, not with a long explanation, just no. The producers pushed back. They brought in the director to reason with him. They reminded him that every minute of production cost serious money. More producers got involved. Meetings happened, arguments were made. Chappelle did not move. His position was clear. He did not need a dress to be funny. He reportedly asked, "What am I, Milton Berle?" Years later, when Chappelle appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show, he gave the full context for his thinking. He talked about a pattern he had noticed in Hollywood, specifically about black male comedians being put in dresses for comedy. He saw it happening around him constantly. and had made a personal decision not to participate in it, no matter how the request was framed or who was asking. The scene was cut. Chappelle kept his dignity and his creative boundaries. And here is what makes this fact so interesting. The film did not suffer for it at all. Bluestreak became a hit without that scene, which raises the question of how many other films have had scenes that were never as necessary as the people insisting on them believed they were. Fact 3. The police station was actually a public library. The entire plot of Bluestreak hinges on a police station. Miles Logan hides a diamond inside an air duct at a construction site. Gets arrested, does 2 years in prison, and returns to find that the construction site is now the LAPD headquarters. The police station is not just a location in the film. It is the central conflict. It is where everything happens. It is where Martin Lawrence spends most of the movie pretending to be Detective Malone. That police station is the Los Angeles Central Public Library. The production team built a massive facade, a fake police station exterior, and physically bolted it to the front of one of the oldest public institutions in the city. The library was established in 1872. It has survived fires, earthquakes, and a century of Los Angeles history.
The fire at LA Central Library. Inside that building, the flames were, firefighters came out.
And for a few months in 1999, it had an LAPD entrance attached to its face. The facade alone took 5 weeks to construct. Then it took another week and a half to attach it to the actual building. Think about the scale of that commitment. The production spent over 6 weeks and considerable resources just to create the illusion that a historic library was a police station. Hundreds of extras walked through those fake doors. Martin Lawrence climbed those steps pretending to be a detective. The cameras rolled in front of a building that was full of books. Next time you watch the film and see Miles Logan striding confidently toward the entrance of LAPD headquarters, just know he is walking into a library. Fact 4. Martin Lawrence earned $20 million, making him one of the highest-paid actors on Earth. In 1999, there was a very short list of actors who could command $20 million per film. Jim Carrey was on it, Eddie Murphy was on it, Adam Sandler was on it, Chris Tucker was on it. And after Bad Boys turned him into a genuine box office force, Martin Lawrence joined that list.
Why you putting all my business in the street? Why you putting all... I just got out of jail and I ain't going back.
Bluestreak paid Lawrence $20 million. For context, he had earned $6 million for the original Bad Boys, which at the time was already considered a significant payday. For Life, the Eddie Murphy film he made the same year as Bluestreak, he earned $8.5 million. Then came Bluestreak, and his salary more than doubled. Here is where the numbers get truly remarkable. The total budget for Bluestreak has been reported as somewhere between $36 million and $65 million depending on the source. Even taking the higher estimate, Martin Lawrence alone accounted for roughly a third of the entire production budget. One actor, one salary, 1/3 of the money spent to make the whole movie. That is what genuine star power looks like when it is translated into dollars. Studios pay those kinds of numbers because they believe the actor is the reason people buy tickets. With Bluestreak opening at #1 and earning over $117 million worldwide, Lawrence justified every dollar of that payday. The gamble paid off. It almost always did with him in 1999. Fact 5. Columbia Pictures gutted the rating and changed the entire tone. Bluestreak was not originally designed to be the film you watched. The original concept was a hard, R-rated action comedy. Martin Lawrence had built his career on raw, unfiltered material. His stand-up pushed boundaries. His sitcom went places broadcast television rarely went.
Somebody living foul. Somebody living... Get over there. Get over there.
An R-rated Bluestreak would have matched that energy completely. Columbia Pictures had a different vision. The studio wanted PG-13. They wanted families. They wanted teenagers. They wanted every demographic possible buying tickets on opening weekend, and an R rating would have cut out a significant portion of that audience. The mandate came down and the film had to change. Rewrites were ordered. Dialogue was softened. Characters were adjusted. Entire sequences were reconceived. The plot itself had to be modified in places to fit within PG-13 requirements. The Martin Lawrence who showed up in Bluestreak was a slightly tamed version of the comedian who had been drawing audiences for years. Here is the question nobody can answer definitively. How much harder did the original version hit? How much further did the jokes go? What was Lawrence allowed to do in that R-rated conception that never made it to any cut of the film? Those answers no longer exist. Columbia wanted PG-13, Columbia got PG-13, and the original version of Bluestreak lives only in the memories of the writers who worked on the early drafts. Fact 6. An Oscar winner was hiding in the credits the whole time. Here is a game fans of 1990s comedies can play. Pick almost any major Hollywood movie from that decade and start looking at the supporting cast and background players. What you will find, over and over again, is the future. Major stars, before anyone knew they would become major stars, showing up in small roles and brief appearances. Bluestreak has one of the best examples of this phenomenon. Octavia Spencer appears in the film, credited as Octavia L. Spencer. She plays a character named Shauna. It is a brief appearance. If you are not looking for her, you will miss her entirely. At the time of Bluestreak, Spencer was simply an actress building her credits, taking whatever work she could find, learning the craft the hard way through experience rather than shortcuts. She would spend years doing exactly this before the right role finally came along. That right role was Minnie Jackson in The Help. Octavia Spencer won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 2012.
Thank you, Academy, for putting me with the hottest guy in the room. Allison Janney, thank you for being in my life.
13 years after she played Shauna in a Martin Lawrence comedy. She has since starred in Hidden Figures, Ma, and numerous other films. She is one of the most recognized character actors working in Hollywood today. In 1999, she was just a name in the credits. Now you know exactly where to look. Fact 7. William Forsythe finally got to be one of the good guys. Study William Forsythe's filmography before Bluestreak and a pattern emerges almost immediately. Raising Arizona, Dick Tracy, The Rock, Stone Cold, Out for Justice.
We released ourselves on our own recognizance.
What Evel here is trying to say is that we felt the institution no longer had anything to offer us.
Film after film featuring Forsythe as the heavy, the menace, the man in the room who everyone else should be afraid of. Hollywood had typecast him with extreme efficiency. If a production needed someone who looked genuinely dangerous, William Forsythe was the call. Bluestreak broke that pattern. Forsythe plays Detective Hardcastle, a veteran cop who works alongside Miles Logan, respects him as a fellow detective, and has zero ulterior motives. No villain arc, no hidden agenda, no scene where he turns on the protagonist. Just a solid law enforcement professional doing his job with the same intimidating presence he always brought to roles. Only this time, that presence served the side of justice. Critics and reviewers actually noticed the shift. Several wrote specifically about how much they enjoyed seeing Forsythe in a role where audiences were rooting for him instead of dreading what he might do next. For an actor whose face had become synonymous with menace, it was a genuine revelation. The casting choice also added something important to the police station scenes. Having Forsythe there as a real detective gave those sequences a credibility they might not have had otherwise. When he interacts with Lawrence and treats him like a genuine colleague, it sells the con more effectively than almost anything else in the film. The audience believes Miles Logan fits in partly because William Forsythe believes it too. Fact 8. Bluestreak opened at number 1 and beat Fight Club at the box office. September 17, 1999, Bluestreak hit over 2,700 screens across America. Opening weekend, $19.2 million, number 1 at the box office. Critics were largely dismissive. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 35% approval rating. Reviewers called it formulaic, generic, standard action comedy fare. The kind of film that critics acknowledge works as entertainment while refusing to grant it any real artistic credit. The audience disagreed completely. Bluestreak earned an A grade from CinemaScore, meaning the people who actually bought tickets and sat through the film loved it. They told their friends. Second viewings happened. The film had genuine staying power in theaters. By the end of its theatrical run, Bluestreak had earned $117.8 million worldwide. Now here is the fact that still surprises people when they hear it for the first time. That number is higher than Fight Club. David Fincher's Fight Club, starring Brad Pitt and Edward Norton, one of the most critically celebrated and culturally discussed films of the entire decade.
We're the middle children of history, man. No purpose or place. We have no great war.
Earned $100 million worldwide. Bluestreak earned $117 million. Bluestreak also outgrossed She's All That, Cruel Intentions, and 10 Things I Hate About You. Films that are still referenced and rewatched and discussed 25 years later made less money than Martin Lawrence pretending to be a detective. That is not an accident. That is what happens when a star connects with his audience at exactly the right moment. The question worth sitting with is this: why do we remember Fight Club as the defining film of 1999, while Bluestreak gets treated as a footnote? Box office does not always determine legacy, but the gap between how these two films are remembered and how they actually performed financially is worth examining. Fact 9. The $22 in the wallet was not an accident. Early in Bluestreak, Miles Logan gets released from prison. He collects his belongings. An officer mentions that his wallet contained $22. The scene moves quickly.
One belt, one shoelace, one wallet containing $22.
One shoelace?
There is no reason to pay special attention to the dollar amount. It seems like a random detail chosen to establish that Logan is broke and starting from nothing. It is not random. The same year Bluestreak was released, Martin Lawrence starred in Life alongside Eddie Murphy. In that film, Lawrence plays Claude Banks, a man who is wrongfully convicted and sentenced to life in prison. Early in that film, when Claude Banks is processed by the system, his personal effects are taken. The amount in his wallet, exactly $22. The Bluestreak writers put that number in deliberately. It is an Easter egg, a signal to fans paying close enough attention. Two Martin Lawrence characters, both going to prison, both broke, both carrying exactly $22. Same actor, same year, same dollar amount across two completely different films. Most audiences missed it entirely. The line goes by fast, and there is no reason to connect it to another film unless you already know to look. But for the people who caught it, the connection lands like a perfectly timed punchline. $22, Claude Banks, Miles Logan. The same broke pocket, the same actor. Two different stories about what prison does to a person. Fact 10. The soundtrack was certified platinum and loaded with heavy hitters. In the late 1990s, a major Hollywood studio comedy was not just a film. It was a cultural package, and the soundtrack was as important as what happened on screen. Bluestreak understood this completely. Columbia assembled a soundtrack featuring Jay-Z, Foxy Brown, Tyrese, and Heavy D. These were not fringe names or artists trying to break through. These were people at genuine peaks in their careers, contributing tracks to a Martin Lawrence comedy because the project had enough cultural weight to attract them. The album performed. It peaked at number 31 on the Billboard 200 and hit number 9 on the Billboard Top R&B and Hip Hop Albums chart. Eventually, it was certified platinum. That means over 1 million copies sold, which in the CD era represented a significant commercial achievement for a film soundtrack. Beyond the album, composer Edward Shearmur created the film's score, the background music that accompanied chases, jokes, quiet moments, and everything in between. Reviewers described the score as having a jovial caper vibe, light enough to complement the comedy, but energized enough to push the action sequences forward without overriding them. Music matters more than most audiences consciously realize. The wrong score turns a funny scene flat. The wrong soundtrack dates a film to a specific moment in a way that makes it feel like a time capsule rather than a movie. Bluestreak got both right, and the platinum certification proved it. Fact 11. The filming locations stretched across all of Southern California. Bluestreak is set entirely in Los Angeles. Every frame is designed to feel like the real city, the real streets, the real culture of Southern California law enforcement and urban life. That authenticity was deliberate and required significant logistical effort. Principal photography ran from January through April 1999. 3 months of filming across multiple locations. The primary base of operations was Sony Pictures Studios in Culver City, where most of the interior police station scenes were controlled environments with professional facilities. But the production spread far beyond the studio lot. Santa Clarita, downtown Los Angeles, Fontana, Venice, various neighborhoods throughout the region provided different textures and backdrops for different sequences. The Mexico border sequences were filmed in actual border regions, real locations providing authentic visual context for the film's climactic chase. Director Les Mayfield was committed to keeping the city authentic. Los Angeles is not just a backdrop in Bluestreak. It functions as a character, a living environment that shapes the story and makes the stakes feel real. Shooting on location rather than building everything on a soundstage made that possible. The city you see in the film is the actual city, captured over 3 months of work across dozens of locations. Fact 12. The house in Bluestreak shows up again in Training Day. Early in Bluestreak, Miles Logan gets released from prison and heads straight to visit his ex-girlfriend Janice, played by Tamala Jones. There is a scene at her house, nice neighborhood, pleasant exterior, unremarkable in every way that matters to the plot. 2 years later, that same house appeared in Training Day. Training Day was released in 2001, directed by Antoine Fuqua, starring Denzel Washington in the role that earned him the Academy Award for Best Actor. Washington plays Alonzo Harris, a corrupt LAPD detective who spends one day showing a rookie officer exactly how the game really works. It is one of the most intense and celebrated films of the decade. The address is 1031 Everett Street. The same location that hosted a scene from a Martin Lawrence comedy became the backdrop for some of the most memorable moments in Denzel Washington's Oscar-winning performance. Same walls, same windows, two completely different emotional atmospheres. Hollywood reuses locations constantly for practical and economic reasons.
25. Please put your hands together for the one and only, the legend, Martin Lawrence.
But there is something worth noting about this particular instance. A house that belonged to a character named Janice in a light-hearted crime comedy transformed into a central location in one of the most acclaimed crime dramas of its era. Same address, completely different universe. Fact 13. The concept was so good that India made 4 unauthorized remakes. Here is a measure of how resonant a story concept truly is. Count how many times other filmmakers in other countries, speaking other languages, decided they needed to tell the same story without asking anyone's permission. Bluestreak scores 4 on that count. In 2002, Bollywood released Chor Machaye Shor in Hindi, starring Bobby Deol. Same basic structure. Thief hides something valuable, goes to prison, comes back to find cops everywhere, has to pretend to belong. Columbia Pictures did not authorize it. Nobody called to ask. The film simply existed. Then it happened again. Bilu Badshah arrived in 2008 as a Telugu language version. Then another Tamil language production in 2011 with the same story. Then a Malayalam language film in 2012. Same plot all over again. 4 separate unauthorized remakes across 4 different Indian regional cinema traditions, all working from the same basic premise that Martin Lawrence made famous in 1999. This is actually more common in international cinema than most Western audiences realize. Hollywood concepts get borrowed regularly, legally and otherwise.
Carlson!
Right here, yeah.
Oh, I thought I was gonna be assigned to a desk.
But 4 remakes of the same film represents a specific kind of legacy. It means the central idea worked across cultural contexts, that the comedy of a criminal trying to pass as a cop resonated with audiences who had never heard of Martin Lawrence and likely never watched the original. Good ideas do not need translation. The concept of Bluestreak worked in English in Los Angeles, in Hindi, in Mumbai, in Telugu, in Tamil, and in Malayalam. That is a universal premise finding its level across very different storytelling traditions. Fact 14. A sequel script was written in the early 2000s and then disappeared into another film. Bluestreak made $117 million worldwide. It opened at number 1. Audiences loved it. A sequel was not just logical, it seemed inevitable. In 2000, reports began circulating that Bluestreak 2 was moving forward. Martin Lawrence and Luke Wilson would reunite. The format would echo 48 hours. Columbia Pictures was engaged. Lawrence had signed a 2-picture deal with the studio worth $20 million per film, and one of those films was supposed to be Bluestreak 2. Screenwriter Steve Carpenter submitted a script in early 2001. The plot had Luke Wilson's Detective Carlson tracking Miles Logan to Mexico. A bomb threat, high stakes, the whole team back together.
Jurisdiction.
Oh, damn that! Damn the jurisdiction! Go, now!
We cannot cross into Mexico.
Entered that particular Hollywood limbo where a film is technically still in development but no longer actually progressing toward production. Years passed. Bluestreak 2 became one of those sequels that fans assumed was coming right up until the moment they stopped assuming it was coming at all. The other picture in that 2-picture deal became National Security, released in 2003 with Steve Zahn replacing Luke Wilson as Lawrence's co-lead. Here is the most intriguing detail. Reports suggest the Bluestreak 2 script was eventually revised, reworked, and repurposed as the foundation for Bad Company, the 2002 action comedy starring Chris Rock and Anthony Hopkins. Different actors, different premise, different everything on the surface, but possibly the same DNA underneath. The sequel that never got made may have instead become a completely different film starring completely different people. Hollywood is nothing if not resourceful with its abandoned projects. Fact 15. Bluestreak and Life Made, 1999, the most dominant year of Martin Lawrence's career. Consider what 1999 actually meant for Martin Lawrence as a working actor. He was not simply one of the busiest people in Hollywood that year. He was arguably the single most productive comedy star operating at the highest level simultaneously across 2 major studio releases. Bluestreak and Life both hit theaters in 1999. Both were major productions. Both featured Lawrence in lead roles opposite significant co-stars. Both required his full creative investment. And both performed at the box office. The cross-contamination between the 2 films is where it gets genuinely interesting. The $22 Easter egg connecting the 2 characters would have been impossible to plant if Lawrence had not been doing both films at essentially the same time. The writers knew about Life. They put the reference in deliberately because they knew attentive audiences who caught it would feel the reward of that connection. Doing 2 major studio films in the same year while maintaining the quality and performance level required of a $20 million per picture star is not a small achievement. Most actors at that level do 1 film every 18 months. Lawrence did 2 in the same calendar year, both of which found their audiences. 1999 was not just a good year for him, it was the apex of his commercial power. Fact 16. The critics were wrong and the audience knew it immediately. A 35% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics calling it formulaic. Reviewers dismissing it as generic fare that brings nothing new to the buddy cop action comedy format. Bluestreak received the kind of critical reception that usually signals a film about to quietly disappear from theaters after 2 weekends. The public responded with $19.2 million in its opening weekend, number 1 at the box office, an A grade from CinemaScore, which measures how audiences who actually attended the film felt about it immediately after watching. The disconnect between critical reception and audience response was almost total. This raises a question worth genuinely thinking about. What were the critics measuring? Because whatever it was not what audiences were experiencing when they sat in those theaters. The people buying tickets were not looking for innovation or formal sophistication. They were looking for Martin Lawrence being Martin Lawrence at maximum volume. And that is precisely what Bluestreak delivered. The $117 million global gross suggests the audiences were finding something real in those theaters. Bluestreak worked because Lawrence worked, because the premise was tight, because the supporting cast understood their assignments, and because a comedy about a thief pretending to be a cop turns out to be an extremely effective delivery mechanism for jokes about institutional authority and the hustle required to survive outside of it. Critics score films. Audiences decide whether films survive. Bluestreak survived, and then some. Fact 17. The production design pulled off a lie that nobody questioned. Think about the central visual challenge of Bluestreak. The entire film rests on the audience believing that Miles Logan fits inside a police station.
I started thinking if I was Miles Logan and I had my diamond hidden in a police building.
Not just physically present, genuinely belonging. The con only works if every person around him treats him like a real detective. And for that to be convincing, the environment itself has to feel completely authentic. The production design team built a working police station environment at Sony Pictures Studios. The interiors, the bullpen, the desks covered in paperwork, the holding cells, the hallways, the interview rooms, everything was constructed to feel institutional and real, rather than stylized and cinematic. Combined with the actual Los Angeles Central Public Library doubling as the exterior, the overall effect was seamless. Audiences watching the film had no reason to question where they were. The library looked like an LAPD building. The Sony interiors looked like an active precinct. Martin Lawrence moved through both environments with the kind of confidence that makes a lie feel like truth. This is the invisible work of production design. When it is done right, nobody notices it at all. The set is just the world the story inhabits. Bluestreak required convincing people that a jewel thief belonged in a police station, and the physical environment of the film did its part to make that conviction hold. Fact 18. The $22 Easter egg represents a level of craft most blockbusters never attempt. The $22 wallet detail deserves additional context because of what it represents in terms of how the filmmakers thought about their audience. The decision to include that specific dollar amount required a level of coordination between two separate film productions in the same year featuring the same lead actor. Someone working on Bluestreak either knew about life or was actively watching what Lawrence was doing across both projects and made a creative decision to create an invisible thread connecting them. Easter eggs in films generally fall into two categories. There are the ones designed to be found, placed prominently enough that attentive viewers will catch them on a first watch. And then there are the ones designed for the small percentage of viewers who are paying a different kind of attention, people who will catch the detail and feel genuinely rewarded for their level of engagement. The $22 is definitively the second kind. The line goes by quickly. You are not thinking about life when you are watching Bluestreak. You have no reason to connect a dollar amount in a wallet to another film. But if you do catch it, and if you know what it connects to, the effect is remarkable. Two broke, imprisoned Martin Lawrence characters carrying exactly $22 across two separate movies in the same year. That is not coincidence. That is craft, and it deserves to be recognized as such. Fact 19. Bluestreak is getting the sequel nobody expected, 25 years later. For decades, fans held on to hope. Reports surfaced periodically. Interviews mentioned it. The internet kept the possibility alive. But Bluestreak 2 never came. Years turned into a decade turned into two. The sequel joined the long list of Hollywood promises that never materialized into actual films. Then, October 25th, 2024 happened. Sony Pictures made an official announcement. Bluestreak 2 is in development. Martin Lawrence is attached to reprise the role of Miles Logan.
A lot of the characters that I did on that show, I didn't even know I could do. I just was put under pressure to...
His production company, Run Tell Dat, is producing alongside Sony. Cole Melissa, a writer whose credits include Chicago PD and Quantico, has been hired to write the screenplay. The timing is not accidental. Lawrence just came off Bad Boys, Ride or Die, the fourth film in the franchise he shares with Will Smith. That film grossed $444 million worldwide and pushed the Bad Boys franchise past $1 billion in total earnings. Lawrence proved, at this stage of his career, that he can still open a movie and bring audiences with him. As of now, there is no confirmed information about whether Luke Wilson or Dave Chappelle will return. The project is in early stages and details are limited, but the announcement is real. Miles Logan is coming back, and the question of whether he still has his criminal instincts or whether 25 years has changed him in interesting ways is one the sequel will have to answer.
The reunion, man. How was that for you?
It was great, man, just to see everybody get together again after 25 years.
It took a quarter century. Bluestreak 2 is no longer a rumor. Fact 20. The legacy of Bluestreak is measured in influence, not just revenue. The $117 million global gross tells one version of the Bluestreak story. The #1 opening weekend tells another. The platinum soundtrack and the 4 unauthorized Indian remakes each add their own chapter. But the full measure of the film's legacy goes beyond any individual statistic. Bluestreak arrived at a specific cultural moment when comedy was being reshaped by performers who brought something raw and authentic to the screen.
And so if I'm across the way and you're over there, there's no way that you... Yeah.
Martin Lawrence at his peak was not performing for critics or trying to win awards. He was performing for the people in those seats who recognized something in what he was doing. The thief pretending to belong in a system that was never built for him resonated because it spoke to something real about navigating institutions you were never supposed to be part of. The film survived critical dismissal. It survived the absence of a sequel for 25 years. It survived the box office landscape shifting completely around it. 4 other countries decided its central story was worth retelling in their own languages without even asking permission. A sequel was officially announced a quarter-century after the original. That is not the trajectory of a disposable comedy. That is the trajectory of something that connected deeply and kept connecting. Bluestreak was never Shakespeare. It never pretended to be. It was a thief in a badge, a diamond in an air duct, and Martin Lawrence turned up as loud as the production would allow. That combination worked in 1999. The sequel announcement suggests someone believes it will work again. The audience will be the final judge, just like they were the first time. Bonus fact, Martin Lawrence nearly did not survive the year. Bluestreak was released. This one is not funny. There is no punchline here. Bluestreak wrapped production in April 1999. The film went into post-production. Lawrence began preparing for his next role, which was Big Mama's House, a comedy about an FBI agent going undercover as an elderly woman. The role required him to wear a fat suit and prosthetics. Lawrence decided he wanted to trim down before production, a reasonable choice that athletes and actors make regularly. In August 1999, he went jogging in Los Angeles. The temperature that day was over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Lawrence was wearing heavy clothing. Under those clothes, he had on a plastic suit, the kind of garment designed to accelerate sweating and speed up water weight loss. His body reached its limit. Lawrence collapsed. His body temperature hit 107 degrees Fahrenheit, a level that causes organ damage and can be lethal within hours if not addressed. He was taken to the hospital and placed in a medically induced coma. He was on a ventilator for 3 days. Doctors were not certain he would survive. The biggest comedic star in Hollywood in 1999 was unconscious in a hospital bed, while the film he had just made was being prepared for theatrical release. He pulled through. He recovered. He made Big Mama's House. He continued his career for the next 25 years and counting, but it came extraordinarily close to ending differently. Bluestreak could have been the last film Martin Lawrence ever made. The comedy you have watched, the performance you have laughed at, the $20 million star who drove $117 million in box office revenue, all of it could have been the ending instead of the middle of the story. The margin between that outcome and the one that actually happened was measured in 3 days, and the limits of what a human body can survive. He survived, and 25 years later, Miles Logan is coming back.
Let's hear it for Detective Malone!
Believe that. 20 facts about a film that most people thought they already knew. A British comedy from 1965 that became the blueprint. A future Oscar winner hiding in the credits. An iconic library wearing a fake police badge. Dave Chappelle holding a line that most people would have crossed. A $22 Easter egg connecting 2 separate films in the same year. A sequel that took a quarter-century to arrive. And a star who nearly did not make it to the release date of the film that paid him $20 million. Bluestreak refused to play by the rules the critics wanted it to follow. 25 years of evidence suggests it did not need those rules. So drop a comment right now and tell us which of these 20 facts hit you the hardest. And tell us which underrated classic we should break down next, because some films do not just entertain. They hold on to their stories until someone finally decides to look.